even during the intermission, if you come to me with those questions near the end. Gleann Doherty is a tour guide. He set up his own company in Derry 13 years ago, I believe. And I first came across Gleann a couple of years ago. We did a piece road in Derry on the 25th, the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in 1972. It was a real privilege to meet him, and I did the tour with him. And I wish I could do it every week, to be honest, because I'm a bit of a history buff. As you get older, a lot of the facts and figures become more difficult to remember. But if you're doing it every day like Gleann is, I'm sure every day you're learning new things, getting a different perspective on it. So I'd be fascinated to see what his take is on the family, because I know myself that it's a topic that's we don't like to talk about now. When you go down and you experience the walk like we did today, and the juxtaposition between the modern city that Dublin is and all the blue chip companies in the background, and then the statues of these miserable famine victims, our ancestors, in the foreground, it's quite a juxtaposition, isn't it? So I'd be interested to hear Glenn's take on it, because actually growing up in Derry and living in Derry with his beautiful wife and family, I'm sure he has many a story to share about the troubles up in the north, and also his own personal story and involvement with somebody in Derry who's from the Bogside. It's a real privilege to have him here, and he's come himself and Linda have come down today to Dublin, and I'm just so happy that the sun is shining. So I wish I look forward to you sharing with us now for the next few minutes what your perspective on it. So can I give a warm round of applause to them?
Oh, a few notes here just on the things, so I have to keep it open just to keep myself going. I do speak in public generally as a job. But then when you stand here in front of this crowd, it's a different ballgame. It is very strange feeling that I do speak in public, but then situations like this, it's a whole different thing, you know. So I'm going to try and walk you through some of what was going on at the time in the 1840s, and I do my best to sort of guide us through it, how things developed, why they developed, and how a one crop failure was so devastating in Ireland. It's a very emotional. I get very emotional this morning, just looking at the statues, because I was doing a lot of reading up columnists, doing my head and sending me things, and reading them as well, trying my best, to try and put together something that sort of made sense. So I'm going to go for it. One of the things I want to say today is it's the 21st of December. Now, my connection to Bloody Sunday, unfortunately, is that my father was one of those murdered on the day. He was number 12, shot dead on Bloody Sunday. But today would have been actually his 26th birthday, or 86th birthday, I should say. If he had lived to see it, which is the 21st of September, 1939. So I'm getting a little emotional here, but I'm just going to start off by looking at the blight itself, when it came, and what the developments over the first couple of years. So the first 2 years is sort of really crucial. So it struck first here in Ireland in 1845. And the two places that actually struck first was Dublin and Fermanagh, strangely. So there's a bit of a gap there between here and County Fermanagh, not too far away from myself. But it did strike in 1845 later in the season. And essentially what that means is that the first crop, or the first batch of potato, had already been grown and pulled out of the ground. So that was essentially safe in 1845. So when the blight does strike, it's the second crop, it's the second half of the year. Now generally, crop wise, your first potato crop being brought in would have been yours to feed your family for 9-10 months of the year, so it would have been cold storage. And the second crop essentially would have been to pay, either sell to pay or use to pay rent, to keep yourself on your plot of land. So the first year wasn't essentially as devastating. The second year again wasn't as devastating, but it's the third year when it comes along. But it's the 2 years prior that build up to the third year. So First year, I'm not saying it's okay, but it's not as devastating as it could have been, because you really have cold storage of maybe 9 months of potatoes. But then your rental crop, essentially when this comes along, that's gone. So that's your wallet, stolen, it's gone. Now, how do you pay your rent from that? Now, you might have chickens, you might have a pig, you might have something, protein, as your potatoes run out 9, 10 months down the line. Now, to pay the rent, you have to sell that, or sell the crops that you've sold as well. But your protein, which is crucial when the potato crop was expiring, your food crop, you haven't got that in year 2, because you sold it in year 1, hoping the potato crop would come back in year 2. Is everybody following that? Right? So I'll just get my breathing together here. I was taking advice from Colin earlier. I'm not sure I shouldn't have listened to him, but it's still out of rock band in 1985. I don't know what it was about. But you can see how things were actually building up. When so 46 comes along, there's a blight total, both crops or any crop that's been grown. So this time you haven't got your storage. You haven't got your Lidls or your Aldis or your super value. That's gone. That's completely gone. And it was your rent was gone from the first year. Your pig's been sold that you might have been able to use, but you used that in the first year. Now, if you can't pay your rent, you're being evicted. So even though the land is arable, you can't grow because you're not there. You've been thrown onto the streets or onto the roads. You imagine the many hundreds and how many thousands of people have been affected over that maybe year and a half, maybe 2 years or so. Now, what this leads to then is year 3, which is 47. Somebody's may know, somebody's may not. It was known as Black 47, because this was the most devastating year of the entire 7-year blight, essentially. Now, the potato did grow in 1847, believe it or not. It didn't produce the normal crop, but there was potatoes grown. So there wasn't a total blight. But you're off your land. You're off your land. You're off your land. So even if it's able to be grown, you're not there to grow it. So 1847 became Black 47. Now, again, when I'm hearing numbers of people died, I heard yourself mention a number, and I don't know if somebody else mentioned numbers. Nobody really knows what the numbers were. So you're talking around 1 million, around 1.5 million, around 2 million emigration. So it's estimated. I mean, I've read books where there was 600,000 died. 600. Then there's other books. There's 1.5 million. So it's estimations or guesstimations on there. So if you take 1 million over, say, 7 years from hunger and disease, 1847 seen almost 400,000 deaths in that one single year. So nearly half the deaths that occurred over the 7 years happened in 1 year in 1847. So that's essentially why it became known as, unfortunately, Black 47. But that was your perfect storm. Basically, all the elements either coming together or falling apart over 2 separate years. They really kick in the 3rd year, essentially, you know. But then again, some people in Britain in the British government, I should say, and the establishment, we're looking at us Irish, going, how backward are we that we depended on one crop? And that goes down to a few different elements, you know. One, you had sort of land division. Now, land division might have been a farmer, say Colin, and they help Colin pay his rent. He has rented his or parts of his farm out to yourself and yourself and yourself. So there's 3 people, 4 people that's going to help Colin pay his rent. Now you have to make a living out of that piece of farm. So you might sublet to this one. So when you start with say 20-acre farm, and then you've done right, I'll give you 4, 4, 4, yeah, and that's what you have, and you're going, well, I might do the same. So I'm going to sublet 2 of my acres to him, and then you might sublet one of your, you can see where the subdivision is going down. Also, you have the laws that prior to that, where Catholics, farmers were forced to hand their land down to their children. And I don't mean to their children. Generally, you'd hand down Colum's the oldest in the family. Generally, Colum's given the farm. But under some English law, then that's not the way it's going to be. So when the head of the household passes, generally Colum takes over the farm. But under the law, Colum, Sean, Eugene, Brian, and Bernadette just over here in the corner, just for example. Well, you're getting a share each. And this is the way it has to be handed down. So you can't give it to the one, you have to break it up. So that leaves, again, 20-acre farm, 5 children, 4 acres each. And then your family, you have 4 acres, 4 children. You hand that down, acre each. So you're reducing the land production, basically. Now, you're not going to be able to subsist on that land, growing wheat, barley, potatoes, and all that. So you have to reduce it down. What's going to grow first? What's going to work first? What's going to work better for you? What's the easy potato, the easy crop to grow? Potatoes. You put it on the ground, it grows, and it grows in poor soil as well. So you're reducing yourself down to not through your own doing, but you're being forced to survive, and the survival is grow what grows best, and you have a crop, and it becomes prominent in Irish society, and that is why it became devastating. We mentioned a whole lot last night, Colin, I should say. But one of the things we did mention is it's not only Ireland that strikes it, it's Europe as well. But the potato was like a fallback crop. If X, Y happened, then he had the potato to fall back on. But with us, this is your stable diet. This is what you're going to depend on. And again, not through your own fault, but forced by British law. They actually do. So in that sort of 7 years, again, you're estimating around 1 million people. It does get higher, it does get lower, depends on what book you're reading, that died from starvation and disease that comes along with those conditions, basically, you know. But what else grew? Now you're only growing potatoes. But then you have the established, well, you have the bigger farmers that are growing wheat, barley. We have a pig farmer. We have a cattle man over here, producing beef, dairy farmer. Where's all that fit? Where did that go? But you're not getting that. Because you're producing that for another market. You're producing that for Britain. And that's what's going to. So each year, between 1845 and 52, Ireland actually produced enough food to feed its population 4 times over. 4 times over each year between 1845 and 52. But 1 million, again, estimate 1 million actually starved to death in that period, and almost half of those were in Black 47, 1847. So the death and immigration. Now, landlords, we mentioned this, we discussed quite a lot last night, I have to say myself, and Colin with the others. But landlords they've seen an opportunity here, because you're no good to them. You're paying a rent, but you're really not no good to them at this stage. Now, what's better for them at this stage is cattle, sheep. You know, you need big estates to keep cattle and sheep, and you're living on those estates, or you're living in as part of subdivided farms. Now, maybe I'll give you a ticket to one way to the United States. How does that sound? On the way. I shouldn't have chosen you for that. The man's got a glint in his eye. But you have the immigration, paid immigration. Get them out, get to Liverpool, and they reckon that's where the Scouse accent comes from. Now, it was pointed out to me a while ago by a group of Scousers that unfortunately had to take around on a tour in the city. That if you look back at the Beatles, this was the 1860s, and in the 1960s, they haven't got a Scottish accent. They haven't got a Scottish accent. They reckon it started, I don't know what Liverpool's under, but they had a certain accent, but it wasn't Scottish. That's really common. It's sort of making its way in. And they think the influence, well, this is what Scousers told me, the influence is the Irish immigrants who came over, maybe the Welsh as well coming over in that mixture. So it did look at not as part of this, it's just that sort of random thought process. Then it went and looked at the Beatles being interviewed, and they haven't got a Scottish accent. The way the real Scottish is now, with all the pronunciations and everything else, and they were saying that it's through the influence of, I suppose, the Irish brogue, if you want to put it that way, you know. But we're drifting off a wee bit, you know. But if you look at even look at the statues this morning there about immigration, I found that just looking at the statue, when you're reading something on a book or a page or a screen, and you're saying skeletons draping a skin, that's the way the Irish were being described at the time. But when you're actually sort of looking at skeletons draped on a skin, well, a statue, it's more than just standing there. I find that very emotional, just looking under the face of these statues, looking back at me, you know. Now I'm going to just read you a wee letter here, not a part of the letter that I did find. It's from 15th December 1846, and it was written by a court magistrate, guy known as Nicholas Cummins. Now he visited Skibbereen in 1846, and this is actually a letter he wrote to the Duke of Wellington, describing what he was seeing at the time. And I'm just going to read it. I haven't learned it all, but it's not that long. So, being aware that I should have to witness scenes of frightful hunger, I provided myself with as much bread as 5 men could carry. So there's still food there. There's still food in the country. That's one thing I picked up from this letter. With enough 5 men to carry. And on reaching the spot, which was Skibbereen, I was surprised to find the wretched hamlet apparently deserted. I entered some of the hovels to ascertain the cause, and the scenes which presented themselves were such as no tongue or pen could convey the slightest idea of. In the first famished and ghastly skeletons, in the first 6 famished and ghastly skeletons, to all appearances dead, were huddled in a corner with some filthy straw, and what looked like a ragged horsecloth, their wretched legs hanging about, naked above the knees. I approached with horror, and found by a low moaning that they were actually still alive. They were there in fever, 4 children, a woman, and what once had been a man. It is impossible to go through the detail. Suffice it to say that in a few minutes I was surrounded by at least 200 such phantoms. Let me see, I just lost my track. Such frightful spectres no words can describe, either from famine or from fever. Their demonic yells are still ringing in my ears, and their horrible images are fixed upon my brain. That's the image that I got in the Keys this morning, just looking at the statues. People were described as skeletons with skin draped over the top of them, green mouthed, green tongued, because they were eating grass to try and survive it. But as I say, as I said in the column earlier, we talked about this last night. You've survivor guilt as well. How did we survive? Why did we survive? When a lot more people, not even surviving leaving the country, survival that way, actually remaining in Ireland itself. How and why were we chosen to do that? How did our ancestors manage to survive such horrible conditions? And some people had, like I mentioned before, survivor guilt. Why did we survive? I'm not going to give them the soup stuff, you know, but taking the soup in the soup kitchens, but again, I mean, as I said in the column before, I'm a glass half full person. I try and look for something positive out of what happened in our fairly recent past, you know. Well, they reckon the wounds or the scars are actually ingrained in your DNA when you go through such harrowing and see such harrowing conditions as well, and survive them, obviously. And they reckon that could be handed down to up to 5 generations, where it's actually ingrained in your DNA that what happened. Because I remember going into my grandmother's when I was younger, or my mother's home for that matter, and as children do, oh, where's dinner? I'm starving. You're not starving. You're not starving. No, she wasn't cheeky about it, but it was not just right off the cue, just right off. You're not starving. You don't know what starving is, you know. Need to go back out again. But again, it's that sort of handed down. I mean, my granny must have been born around 18 or 1920. So that's only what's 55 years after the great sort of hunger, you know, 60 years after the great hunger. So you can see where it has been handed down over generations. But again, for me, I think a lot of Irish people, we mentioned the sort of far right this morning, and they do make a lot of noise. For me, they are a small minority, but they do get a lot of broadcast. They do make a lot of noise, but for in general, I think the Irish people have taken what happened to us and looked at other people across the world, and we can see ourselves in them. I mean, over the 1840s, I mean, the Choctaw, there's many things we've spoken about over the last few weeks. Sent £170 in 1845, 46, which is, I think it's about £4,000 or £5,000 today, you know, or quite a lot of money. And they had just done their Trail of Tears and Death, I mean, 10 odd years before that, you know, and they were looking at us and seeing themselves in us. We're looking then across the world and seeing ourselves in other people. You can take Palestine, you can take Gaza, you can take Syria, you can see, you can take the Jews in the 1930s when they were being, you had the far right, a guy called Mosley. Can't remember his first name. Like, we did the Battle of Cable Street, East London, 1936. Do you read that one? Battle of Cable Street, East London. I know the reason I'm living you because you're living in London, you know. But what happened is the far right, the fascist group, gathered in central London and marched on East London to attack essentially the Jewish area. I don't know if it was on London or not, but it was also the Irish Catholic area. And quite a lot of other people live in there as well, and they banded together as one and gave the far right a good walloping, you know. And it became known as the Battle of Cable Street. It's an interesting thing to actually read about. I've read it about this morning as well. So that's what I sort of take of what happened to us and what we've gone through, that we can apply it to other people's conditions. It's not really a coincidence that we have been in the top 4 of things like GoFundMe. Irish people are consistently in the top 4, and we're consistently in the top 10 of what they call the giving index, which is people donating across the world. Because for me, I'm sure a lot of others and a lot of yourselves are looking at situations and you can see where we came from, and we can see other people going through the same. And for me, the legacy of that is we've become more compassionate, more empathy, and felt more sympathy for people, and we're prepared to act, even when sometimes it wasn't seen as the right thing to do. Somebody mentioned Nelson Mandela, where they go, the ANC, it wasn't the right thing to do to boycott South African goods. But then you had women in Dublin in Dunnes stores in 1984. Basically, no, that's it. We're not doing that. We're not going to handle South African goods. And that was one woman. Can't remember the first name or her name actually, but she made a stand, made worldwide news, because you would imagine that she's looking at what would happen in South Africa, Africa in general, but South Africa in particular, and transferred what happened to us to them. So the legacy for me is showing more compassion, more sympathy, and more empathy with regimes and problems around the world. Yeah. So I just want to read just one wee before I go, just before I finish. It's a very short text, and it was a wee bit done by a guy called Terence McSweeney, the Lord Mayor. He knows a lot about hunger. He died, I think, after 73 days of hunger strike in 1920. But his very special quote is, "It is not those that conflict the most, but those that can suffer the most who will conquer." Thank you very much.
We can build on this, right? It's the right heart, it's the right attitude, it's the right perspective. And I'm always grateful to hear people come and share with me. So on that note, God bless, thank you everyone, have a great day.